Hi, everybody. Today is Friday, September 26, 2025, and our friends Colonel Wilkerson and Larry Johnson are back with us. Welcome back.
Good with you.
Please subscribe and hit like button to help us reaching more people. And I want to start, Larry, with
Where's the button, Nima?
it's not there.
I like Larry. Come on.
Yeah. And Larry, let's start with the case of Charlie Kirk. And as time goes by, it's getting much more suspicious. I've shared a video with you in which
Yeah.
shows that somebody on YouTube is trying to explain that the bullet came from his right side and from the back side and then came out. And yesterday, I've learned from the Candace Owens podcast that in that image that he tries to show that it's the blood coming out from the backside. That's not the blood, it's the necklace of
Right.
Charlie because of his movement from. And what's your understanding of these, because there are many things out there that people are making new arguments. What's your take on that?
Well, the fact that there's so many different stories being circulated on the internet should be your first clue that this was an organized, let's call it conspiracy to kill Charlie Kirk. This was not some lone gunman acting on his own. And, the thing I said to Garland Nixon yesterday, because Garland was he worked as a law enforcement officer for 27 years. I said, if you show up and you find a body, or if they call you and somebody's been killed, first question you ask is, well, has anybody made any threats against him? With respect to Charlie Kirk, the government of Ukraine has put Charlie Kirk on their list as someone who should be assassinated. He was on the Mirtovich list. So that's where you start, because this Tyler Robinson, apparently his uncle is linked to the Azov battalion in the Ukraine. So let's just start there with, this was not a lone gunman. That's the first lie. And then when you get all these other stories being popped out, oh, it's from the right, oh, it was from the left, oh, it was a palm pistol. Right away, what you do when it is an organized conspiracy, you flood the zone with a bunch of distractors. Set the squirrels loose so the dogs won't know which way to run. As far as the claim that the shot came from the side or from behind, that's just a load of crap. All you got to do is watch the video frame by frame when he's shot, and what you see is, and this is pretty odd because it's not easily explained, but you see a shockwave. You see his shirt literally presses in, rises up, and then falls back down. He's got the word freedom. The word freedom becomes, a curved, and that all happens in literally a fraction of a second. The other thing in that the video claiming he was shot from the side, where they say, oh, this is the bullet. No, it was his necklace. But again, you got to recognize something. When he was hit from the front, it had enough force that the necklace flew off from here behind him in just a fraction of a second. So the simple fact that you're getting all of this distraction tells me this is deliberate obfuscation.
Yeah. The other strange thing is that there is no autopsy for Charlie Kirk, and here is the audio file about that, Larry.
Do the request. They emailed me back. He did not go in for an autopsy. The death certificate was signed by the doctor at the hospital.
Oh, okay. Can you just do a field clip documenting that?
I'm sorry, 10-9?
Can you just add a step to the case documenting that there was no autopsy? Yeah.
287, I'll be clear to the hospital. I need an officer at Timpanogos Hospital to come stage in the emergency room bay.
Jesse just told me that he just got off the phone and Charlie's wife is coming to signature and they're bringing a car over here for her right now.
Charlie's wife is coming to land at Signature, you said?
Sir, and Jesse's going to go to Duncan right now and pick up a car for her.
Okay, I'm a little confused because that's what Corey just said. They said they're landing at Duncan, so I don't know where they're landing, but we will just kind of play it by ear, I guess, best that we can.
Yeah. Why not autopsy? And what's the problem with that?
It should be an
So-
option. I mean, this is a criminal murder. There's got to be an autopsy because you got to collect evidence that can be presented in court when you're going to try to convict somebody of to claim this kid Tyler was the one that shot him, which he wasn't. The fact, and even the claim that he was shot with a 30-06, that's a lie. And so they're putting out deliberate misinformation. It's really alarming. And so, it's one thing that they hadn't done the autopsy because that call sounded like that was within 24 hours of the shooting. But if they still haven't done an autopsy, then that's a real problem.
This is very much reminiscent of what was uncovered, unfortunately, later, because it was not allowed out by the Warren Commission about JFK's assassination. As Larry said, you obfuscate everything you possibly can immediately. You flood the zone.
Yeah. Here is a video, Larry, and it shows a guy in front of Charlie Kirk, and who seems to be part of the security team. Here is the video, Larry. And the other video here, the same guy is giving something to one of the bodyguards, Larry.
Yeah. Yeah. So, look, I mean, we can only deal with the actual facts we have on the table. Fact number one is there was a gunshot, and it was not from a small palm pistol. Like I said, I've only trained 350 people in shooting firearms, semi-automatic pistols, so I do have some sense of what a pistol sounds like as opposed to a rifle. So you've got a clear noise that is not associated with a pistol. The bullet wound that's visible, there's no exit wound because we've got shots from behind that don't show it. That was not caused by a 30-06. There's just unless it was a specially designed round of ammunition. And what I mean by that is most conventional, like the rounds that are used for hunters, have a lead bullet with a copper, jacket, or are steel cord, which is pure steel. But there's something like frangible bullets that when they don't have a solid core, and when they hit, they break up and fragment. But those are not common with 30-06. And so if some special type of bullet was used, that right away would tell you that this kid, Tyler Robinson, didn't do it. This was an organized op. So we know simply from the sound of the rifle, the sound and the nature of the wound, that it wasn't what the FBI is claiming it is. But then it goes back to what Colonel Wilkerson was saying, man, they flood the zone with all these distractions and misinformation. And what's really troubling is they're not doing the basic things that you need to do with an investigation. That's what's really, that's another tip off that there's something nefarious afoot.
And I would just add, Nima, that I keep going back to History Would Not Absolve Us, which is the best book, blow by blow, on Kennedy's assassination that I've read. And it also leads you through its notes to other things like the initial autopsy and then the kind of cover-up autopsy that happened later, and how the two autopsies didn't agree with one another. And what Larry was just talking about is clearly a part of it too. There was a special bullet, and the bullet was not the kind that goes through, like it would go through a deer or whatever. It's the kind of bullet that goes in, fragments, and wipes everything out as it's passing through. So, that assassination was a farce in terms of the results of the Warren Commission. I suspect this one will be a farce too.
Yeah. Larry, do you think that are we going to learn anything from FBI or the officials about? Are they going to respond to these sort of doubts that many people have in the United States and outside of the United States?
Oh, you mean?
I'm talking about FBI responding to these.
Yeah, they'll be as forthcoming as they have been on the Epstein files.
Yeah. They'll be as forthcoming as Donald Trump or someone under him or behind him tells them to be.
Yeah, this the sort of the good news in this is you got Candace Owens on the case, and I don't always agree with some of what everything that her take, but she's tenacious, and she was a very good close friend of Charlie's and worked with him early on, and she's not letting go of it, and she's not afraid, and that's really what it's going to take. And I think as more and more of these discrepancies come out, you're going to see Tucker Carlson probably take it up.
Yes.
So this ain't going away.
Yeah. And here is what we've learned from Washington Post, that Pete Hegseth just calling generals and admirals to have a urgent meeting. And people are speculating, is that about Venezuela? Is that about Middle East? Is that about Russia? Because looking at what's going on between Russia and the United States and the West, it's so much the way that the things are escalating so much unbelievable, because you see the drones coming to these European countries, and the possibility of a false flag operation that could happen in Europe, in London. Let's assume something happens in London. And how do you see that? And what is your speculation, Colonel, on this meeting? What is the main objective of this meeting?
I have no idea, but first, let me say that it's stupid. We wouldn't even assemble all the sub-commanders in U.S. Pacific Command when I was a member of that command, the largest unified command at the time, in 1984-85, in a single spot. And the way we got around that, of course, was CIVITS was becoming secure video teleconference, and now is even better, a way to talk over long distances and with very little time delay. Now, the President of the United States, for example, CIVITSed with his commander in Baghdad during the Iraq War. Very good system, so you don't need to bring them together. That's the first thing. The second thing is, and this is really foreboding, I hate to even talk about it, but in July 1935, Hitler summoned all of the generals and admirals in the military to Berlin. And he summoned them there to tell them that essentially they were going to have to renew their oath. Their oath would not be to the Weimar Republic's constitution. It would be to Hitler. That's another possibility. Another possibility is that Hegseth is just preening and showing what he can do. And we'll start the whole thing off with getting down on a knee and saying the Lord's Prayer and telling him he's going to Christian nationalize the Department of War or whatever. Another thing is, as you suggested, that he could be trying, Trump could be trying to frighten Putin. Good luck there. Putin's not frightenable. So I have no idea why they're coming together, but it's not very smart.
Yeah. Larry.
Yeah. Well,
what's your thinking?
Yeah. It's not, I don't think it has anything to do with any war plan, because again, you're bringing in the generals that work for TRADOC, the training command, or for Space Command. So, it is. I mean, it's very bizarre. Number one, sort of related, but not directly related to this. I am extremely pissed off, I guess is the correct technical term, that you haven't had a single member of the U.S. military in command, any of the generals. None of them have resigned in protest over Trump's illegal order to kill the people in those boats off the coast of Venezuela. That is a criminal act. It's an act of war, and there is absolutely no justification. Over 23 years working at military exercises, I saw 253 rules of engagement that were always listed for special operations forces. There is no justification to go kill people in a boat because you think they're carrying drugs. If you're a cop and you're on the street, whether you're in Brazil or Philadelphia or New York City, and you see two drug dealers on the corner and they go up and deliver drugs to somebody in a car, you can't get out and shoot and kill them. Unless you go up to arrest them and they pull a gun on you, then you can shoot them. But in this case, Donald Trump issued orders to Southern Command to execute the people on that boat who were not shooting at U.S. forces. They weren't shooting at anybody. And yet we decided that we've got the right to kill them. This is, and so, okay, Trump can be, you can excuse him for being stupid and evil on that front. But what's the excuse of these guys and gals in uniform that are in command? They went along with it. And that this is how war crimes happen. When you've got people in the military that have an obligation to refuse to carry out an illegal order, they didn't. So, it'd be nice if actually Hegseth had a moment of conscience and said, "Oh, we shouldn't do that. I'm calling everybody together because we're gonna strip people of their rank and march them out and court-martial them right here." But that's an idle fantasy on my part.
Neiman, let me add some operational detail to that. Post 9/11, George W. Bush, president at the time, of course, was furious. And I'm telling you, he was furious. First, he was kind of perplexed, and then he was kind of, leaning back in his chair like, oh, God, the American people are going to blame us for this, and thinking about his political future. And then he was angry and furious. He even had a meeting in the White House with about 30 or so Christian fundamentalists and others to try and, as he put it, to us, directly to us, his cabinet, I'm trying to get my rage under control. Now, we did all of that as background to we began to do fast rope down on ships all across the world. We were truly worried about those ships taking, shall we say, byproducts from Japan's very extensive nuclear industry to France and elsewhere, because they were unguarded ships for the most part, and they had nuclear material on them. But we were worried about a lot of things. In all of that concern, in all of that rage, we never went after a ship without following the protocol, the rules of engagement, and so forth. We did take a couple on lethally after informing at the last minute, which was not exactly protocol, the flagging country, in most cases Panama, but we never engaged them with lethal fire. We captured them, or they got away, or they dumped the cargo overboard. And that was frustrating for the military, frustrating to fast rope down and you watch them throwing it over before you get there. And since it's in the ocean and you're not able to retrieve it, it usually was fairly deep water, then you're lost. I mean, you don't have anything but what you can find on board the ship if there's any other contraband or whatever. So it was frustrating as hell. And we were doing it all the time, but we never never post 9/11 and all those deaths resorted to this kind of behavior. This is unconscionable. It just as Larry said, it's a war crime.
Yeah. Larry, Donald Trump said that he's not going to let Israel to annex the West Bank. And do you think he's going to have that sort of leverage on Netanyahu to do that?
No, no. He'll say what he has to say, but he could bring Netanyahu to heel right now, and he won't. Trump is bought and paid for by the Zionist lobby. Period. And they got what they paid for. So I don't care what he says that, but I don't see him in any kind of position to stop it. And Israel, Netanyahu, just pure evil, and they're gonna continue doing what they want to do until they get stopped.
Nima, I think Trump's scared too. I think he's scared, and what Larry was just talking about with regard to Charlie Kirk is one of the reasons he's scared.
Yeah.
He's very scared. I mean, ostensibly, they've tried to assassinate him a couple of times already, but he knows damn well, as I know, as Larry knows, as you should know, Nima, that if Mossad wants to assassinate you, you'll be assassinated, period.
Yeah. I mean, look, the connection with Ukraine and Israel has a close relationship with Ukraine.
Yeah.
I mean, the Jewish angle here through Zelensky, we've got, I put a picture up the other day on my blog of this Azov battalion fighter who's wearing a swastika tattoo on the back of his neck, praying at the Wailing Wall in Jerusalem wearing a kippah, the skull cap. So is it possible, how could we allege that Israel would be assassinating people? Well, we've only got about, let's go ask the family of Yitzhak Rabin.
Yeah.
And the allegations that Bibi Netanyahu had played a direct role in that. The Netanyahu was seen at one point before the assassination leading a procession carrying a coffin marked Yitzhak Rabin. So this is one place where you start that investigation with respect to Charlie Kirk. But again, the settlers in the West Bank, as they're stealing land that Palestinians have lived on for generations, and the Israeli government, the army, stands by and encourages them, allows it to go forward. So Donald Trump said, "Oh, it's not going to happen." Nonsense. It's easy for him to say it, and then when it happens, he'll just shrug his shoulders and move on.
Yeah.
The only positive thing I can see happening, Nima, and it's a long shot, is that the Colombian president's speech at the UN General Assembly seems to have got some people excited, as well it should. They could do, as I was saying before we went on the air, they could do what we did with South Africa, and they could call for, the Colombian president could call for a UN vote, UN General Assembly vote, and 2/3 is all you need. And at least you would get trade embargoes, arms embargoes. You might not get a complement of troops, but Indonesia's president has said 20,000 or more. And you've got other people now stepping up and saying behind the curtains, as it were, that they would provide 5,000 or 6,000. The big problem there, of course, is money. And what Trump would do probably is, Reagan set the precedent for it, withdraw the 28 or 29% of the UN's contribution that the U.S. provides, and that would make, these troop deployments are very expensive, and that would make it almost impossible unless someone like China or another rich country stepped in and said, well, I'll fund that portion that the U.S. was paying. So it's a wild shot, but it is another quiver in the arrow in the quiver, got that backwards, that is full now of arrows headed at Bibi. Not least of which is Iran, if he attacks it, and I think he's going to.
Here is what Donald Trump said moments ago. You've just received the video.
Have maybe a deal on Gaza, very close to a deal on Gaza. How are you? Hello, Peter. And it's looking like we have a deal on Gaza. And we'll let you know. Mr. President, I think it's a deal that will get the hostages back. It's going to be a deal that will end the war. It's going to be a deal which it's going to be peace. I think we have a deal. That'll be number 8, Peter. Not the
That doesn't have anything to do with what Netanyahu said at the UN. And here is what Netanyahu said. It's somehow it's a response to what Donald Trump just
Is this a 9 o'clock speech this morning?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Another message to those Western leaders. Israel will not allow you to shove a terror state down our throats. We will not commit national suicide because you don't have the guts to face down a hostile media and anti-Semitic mobs demanding Israel's blood.
Oh, he literally says it doesn't matter who's talking about the 2-state, 1 state, and he doesn't care any of that.
Yeah.
You notice
Larry-
how empty the chamber was?
Yeah.
Everybody left. Larry, you said that Donald Trump is not able. Who's going to be able to do that? Who has the power to do that if Netanyahu doesn't care about anybody, even the president of the United States?
Well, the reality is, even if the United States doesn't intervene, if the BRICS countries, along with the Arab Islamic countries, simply acted in concert, shut down all trade with Israel, complete embargo, nothing goes in, nothing comes out, or that the only person they can trade with is the United States. It's going to take that kind of action. They could actually, if Turkey joined in that effort, you could stop Israel, but these other countries won't do it. It's within their power, and they won't do it. They have excuses. So this nightmare of genocide is just going to continue, and until at some point. Israel's going to overreach. They're going to Netanyahu, with all of his hubris, will probably go ahead and attack Iran. And the odds are, when that in response to that attack, Iran will cause more harm and damage to Israel than it experienced during the 12-day war, significantly more. And that will, I think, get to the point of even threatening Israel's existence as a continued nation.
Yeah. Colonel, here is what Netanyahu said about Iran at the UN.
Pilots and American B-2 pilots bombed Iran's nuclear enrichment sites. I want to thank President Trump for his bold and decisive action. President Trump and I promised to prevent Iran from developing nuclear weapons, and we delivered on that promise.
Yeah.
That's an abject lie.
Yeah.
And he knows it's a lie. Did you hear him the other day when he said, when someone said they were close and very close, he said, no. And I almost fell off my chair. He said, no, they're a long way away from making a nuclear weapon. Well, he's been at the UN holding up his placard and saying it's tomorrow morning they're going to make a nuclear weapon. He's changed his mind now. I'm sorry. I think what I heard about the fatwa is probably true, that they had a real tough meeting and the Islamic gurus were there, if you will, and they decided that the fatwa would be slightly tweaked, and the fatwa will say what is anathema to them and their version of Islam is use of a nuclear weapon and not possession. That tells me, if that's true, if that information is true, that tells me that they are either there or they're very close. And I don't think we'll know anything about it.
Right.
And then we've got, a nuclear standoff. And there's no question in my mind who will be the first one to use a nuclear weapon in the region. In this case, it won't be us. It'll be Israel. And I think Larry's right. I think they're going to be in existential peril if they start another war with Iran, and I think they're going to. So, he'll be begging for Trump to come in. Trump will probably come in. The question is, how does he come in? But either way, just partially with air power or majorly with air power failing and then with ground forces is a disaster for the empire, just as it is a disaster for Israel.
Larry, what's so tragic is that they're doing each and everything to force Iran into making that sort of decisions. And as they did with Russia, they forced Russia into the war with Ukraine. They forced China to respond to the tariffs. This is the sort of policy that didn't work so far, but they're continuing with the same sort of strategy.
Well, let's give them credit, Nima. They're consistent. Come on. They do something very well. I mean, they're very bad at it, but they're very good at being very bad and incompetent. So, and also your question presupposes that there's some sort of broad strategy that these people are thinking about in a strategic fashion, as opposed to just looking at the wall immediately in front of them and trying to figure out whether to paint it, or knock it down, or go around it. It's almost as if they decided, who can we put in power that's going to make as many bad decisions as possible and bring the United States to the brink of ruin and set the world on fire. Oh, I got it. Let's put Donald Trump in there, because that's exactly how it's panning out right now. And we haven't even begun to talk about Venezuela, other than my previous rant about the officer's failure to resign. But you're looking right now at the same kind of military buildup that took place before we attacked Iran. Before we attacked Iran, we deployed naval and air forces to the region. And that's exactly what we're doing now off the coast of Venezuela. And so this, when you look at the entire scheme of things, Trump has he's failed to stop the war in Ukraine as he vowed he would do in 24 hours. He's now admitting it's going to take a lot longer, and essentially he's washed his hands of it. He's antagonized the Chinese to no end, angered the Indians, angered Brazil. So at a time when you think you might want to have as many friends as possible, Trump is like going out of his way to alienate the world.
Yesterday, Nima, I was told by a military friend, one of the few who still talks to me, that they were looking at Operation Just Cause as an example of what they were going to do to Maduro. And I just reminded my friend that Panama is a very small place, has about 4.5 million people at most, maybe about 29,000 square kilometers. Venezuela is about 350,000 square kilometers and about 29 million people, and has lots of mountains and really rough territory. And if you're going to do the snatch with the 18th Airborne Corps minus drop the 82nd on them or whatever, you better know, one, how to find him. We had a hell of a time finding Noriega till he took refuge in the Nuncia. And you better know exactly how you're going to extricate yourself, because you're going to have a tough time doing it. And if you bring air power in and other things like we did in Panama on a very limited basis, then you're probably going to have a real mess, because you're not going to be able to sort out what you've done on the ground, friendlies and enemies. We had the very first use in combat of the F-117s. And that turned out to be a real joy for Powell as chairman, because the first thing he learned from Michael Gordon at the New York Times was that they had dropped their bombs and missed the Comandancia, their target. And Powell had tried to talk the Air Force out of not doing it, because he said, we don't need that kind of thing. We're just going in, getting him, and coming out. Well, that's how things can go haywire for you. And it would go haywire big time, I think, in Venezuela. And this is the president who doesn't start wars, right? This is the president who doesn't. He just kills people on the high seas. He doesn't start wars.
Hey, and let's not forget that when we did that invasion in Panama, we had at least 3 U.S. military bases there in Panama.
Yes.
So we didn't have to worry about, we already had military presence in country.
I knew the terrain like the back of our hand.
Yeah. You know, I had just left the Central American branch. So my branch, I remember the analyst she was the primary analyst. The CIA spent a year trying to provoke Noriega into doing something so we could justify an attack on him. Okay. I mean, the CIA was, so this is one of those rare cases where an analyst, her name is Alicia, she was brought into the DO, the Directorate of Operations Planning. And so, because she was having to write for the Presidential Daily Brief, and so they had to make sure that she had information from what the ops side was doing as well. So the notion that this was like some sort of organic internal thing, you know, the agency was actively involved there, and I guarantee you, agency is actively involved right now in Venezuela, trying to recruit people, spread money around, trying to see if they can convince sparking a coup against Maduro, or at a minimum trying to identify where he is. You know, maybe there will be an attempt to grab him, but you know, if the U.S. decides to go in there militarily, you know, there's going to be a bunch of dead Marines at Dover Air Force Base.
And Nemo, something a lot of Americans, I doubt more than a dozen today, know this. Larry probably does. We actually had to relieve the Southern Command commander. Powell had to relieve him on the orders of the president and the Secretary of Defense because he said it was stupid and we shouldn't do it. So we reached out and got Max Thurman, a really aggressive general, and threw him in there and told him to do it. That tells you something. That's the last general officer for whom I had some respect in the American military.
Do you recall his name?
I don't, and I should. Fluent Spanish speaker, knew the place really well, had been there for a while, and made some really cogent arguments about why we didn't need to do it.
Yeah.
But you know why we really did it.
Yeah.
Larry, I think the question would be, how is that going to influence the Trump presidency in the United States if they attack Venezuela? Is Donald Trump going to gain more support from the base, or he's going to lose? That would be much more important in their decisions, in my opinion.
Well, you know, as I described Trump, his foreign policy is a form of Tourette's syndrome. You know, with Tourette's syndrome, you can be talking and then all of a sudden you'll have an irrational outburst. You know, it's like, I'd be talking to you and then, Jesus Christ! And, you know, you go, oh, what? So, and with Donald Trump, it is, you know, I'm the peace president. I won a Nobel Peace Prize. We're going to get Panama Canal. And I hope to bring countries together. Give me Greenland. And, you know,
Putin's a paper tiger.
Yeah. Bagram, you know, and now Venezuela. Look, this, you know, apparently Trump has been briefed, as Colonel Wilkerson was saying, that we can easily take care of Venezuela just like we did at Panama. And Trump is foolish enough to take those briefings and not intellectually curious enough to really ask questions and challenge. So he goes along with it. Just like Israel promised, hey, man, we're going to take out the top echelon of the Iranian government and it'll collapse in 2 days. Okay, yeah, let's go get them. Then when it goes sour, he goes, I didn't know anything about this. I was surprised. So in this case, he'll be initially ready to celebrate. Yeah, we, you know, got rid of Maduro. We put Venezuela on its, you know, on a new path. Except when it goes sour, he'll be looking for somebody to blame because he didn't make the decision, or so he will claim. So this is, this thing has a sort of inertia of its own, and Trump within that he's not thinking strategically. All he's doing is thinking politically and it's a political myopia, where he only sees so narrowly whether it's going to benefit him, and he always goes with the assumption it will benefit until it turns sour and doesn't.
Even if I were Nicolas Maduro, I would be very, very concerned that Trump would turn to Bibi and say, get rid of him. Because Bibi has made assassination a matter of fact. It just happens. I mean, there's no one that Bibi would not try to assassinate in my mind. If you get on his wrong side deeply and profoundly enough, he will have you assassinated. And I'm not so sure that Zelensky and that crowd in Ukraine aren't on the same sheet of music with that.
Yeah.
Colonel, do you feel that is there anybody in the Trump administration, Donald Trump himself, when you compare it to JFK? Because in those days, with the case of Cuba, missile crisis with Cuba, he was somehow criticizing the people who were advocating for attacking Cuba with bombs and with nuclear bombs and all of that. Is there anybody there? Is there anybody to go against this sort of rhetoric in Washington?
We were having this discussion in closed circles within a group of retired veterans about a week and a half ago or so. And one of the laments that came up, very a cri de coeur almost. I mean, all of us had this sort of heartfelt feeling that our military was not what we knew it to be, about the generals and the admirals. There's no courage. There is only the expectation of great monies when they retire, and the expectation that while they are 3 and 4 stars, they'd better keep everything on an even keel so that that will be the prospect that comes to be. They don't have any concern about the services anymore. They don't have any concern about the men and women under them. Now, there are exceptions to this, but the exceptions usually are proof of the rule. And we shrugged our shoulders and said, you know, there's no one in the military that we would follow to a pool of water if we were starving and dying of thirst. There just isn't. And none of them have been held accountable for mistake after mistake after mistake in the past 20 years plus. None of them. The last general that performed an operation that was superb in every respect was Tony Zinni, a Marine 4-star general who performed a withdrawal under pressure from Somalia and hardly killed any enemy and hardly had any casualties himself. It was a marvelous operation. You could say, well, it was Somalia. Well, Muhammad Farah Aidid proved Somalia wasn't just nothing. He could bring some pee if he wanted to. We haven't had a general in the military of Tony Zinni's equivalent since.
Larry, here is what Netanyahu said about the casualties. He says that Israel is applying more measures to minimize civilian casualties. Here is what he said.
More measures to minimize civilian casualties than any military in history.
He's a liar. But that, he always views this as sort of a marketing campaign. Just tell people what they want to hear so they can repeat it. But that's just an abject lie. And we've got the bodies of the Palestinian women and children to prove it.
Yeah. Colonel, Netanyahu was somehow bragging about how Israel was capable of this mission of decapitation in Iran, in Yemen, in Lebanon. And here is what he said.
Half the Houthi leadership in Yemen, gone. Yahya Sinwar in Gaza, gone. Hassan Nasrallah in Lebanon, gone. The Assad regime in Syria, gone. Those militias in Iraq, well, they're still deterred. And their leaders, if they attack Israel, will also be gone. And for Iran's top military commanders and its top atomic bomb scientists, well, they're gone too.
Colonel, what's so amazing when I look at Iran and Yemen, even, and I don't think that they're weaker than before these sort of assassinations. They're in Iran, they're much more informed, much more prepared for what's would happen in the near future. But it doesn't seem that would be the case in the mind of Netanyahu. He feels that he's in a better position because of this sort of assassinations that Netanyahu and his government committed.
Well, one of the things Bibi is a master at, and psychologically speaking, demented at, is he cannot admit a mistake. He dare not admit a mistake. He dare not say that he has ever done anything that was not productive for Israel. Everything Bibi has ever done, every word he has ever uttered is for Israel, for his version of Israel, and is for his sustenance as the leader of that Israel. So he can't admit any kind of error, any kind of mistake. He's not human in that respect. Every great leader in history has had at one time or another. Even Ronald Reagan, bless his heart, had to come out and fess up to the American people that Iran-Contra was what it looked like, a mess, and saved himself from impeachment by giving that speech because he was the great communicator. And people took him at his word that he, didn't know everything, but he knew a little bit. So Bibi cannot do that. It's not in his nature, his character, or his being. Bibi just keeps doubling down on failure. And that's going to be ultimately his great mistake. And I think it's coming. I think it's imminent. And I think Iran's going to deliver it.
Well, and let's explode this mythology of, the Israeli ability to use violence to settle issues and to bring about peace. I call it it's the Munich Olympics myth.
Yeah.
That in the aftermath of the Munich Olympics in '72, Israel vowed that it was going to hunt down all the killers, kill them, and that would stop that'll teach people. That'll stop the violence. Well, number one, Israel failed in that mission, and they ended up killing at least one person that was not had no involvement at all with what happened in Munich. A completely innocent man up in Norway, I believe it was. But we've got, they've killed and murdered over and over and over, all in the claim that it's going to buy them peace, and it never does. So what we've seen with all their killing in Lebanon and in the West Bank and in Gaza and wherever, all it does is it just breeds more violence.
Yeah, I had a rabbi tell me one time, Nima, that all that a tooth for a tooth and an eye for an eye did was produce a blind and toothless world. That's precisely. And that's Israel's strategy. That's their fundamental philosophy. You take my eye, I'll take 4 of yours. You take my tooth, I'll take 20 of yours. Lately, it's even more than that. But I remember my GW, George Washington University student who'd served 2 years in the IDF, telling me in a closed session in the back room, and I won't mention his name or anything, about Operation Cast Lead, in which he participated. And his battalion commander told him, we're going to kill everything in sight. It was sort of a precursor for what they're doing now. We're going to kill everything in sight. Men, women, children, dogs, cats. We're going to destroy everything we come upon because no one is going to challenge us again. We must reestablish our dominance and deterrence. So kill everything.
Larry, here is General Petraeus saying to Al-Jolani or
Good Lord, man. This is turning into a torture session. Why don't you just waterboard me next time, okay?
Yeah. There is no.
All right, go ahead. Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
Certainly, yes, a degree of political Islam. But frankly, what you have done since toppling the Bashar al-Assad regime has validated what it is that I assessed it. And I was criticized, by the way, quite considerably. I just want to tell you, really on behalf of all the people who are here, that this conversation has truly filled me with enormous hope. It has been very, very heartening and illuminating. Your vision is powerful and clear. Your demeanor itself is very impressive as well. And so, again, on behalf of all here and all those that are watching virtually and so forth, we thank you for sharing your vision today. We wish you strength and wisdom in the difficult work ahead. We obviously hope for your success, inshallah, because at the end of the day, your success is our success.
Yeah, your success is our success.
You didn't even show some of the more demeaning words that he uttered. Are you getting enough sleep? Are you getting enough sleep? Yeah. You bloodthirsty killer.
This was sort of like watching one man give another man a blowjob. Excuse me. God Almighty. I mean, this is beyond disgusting and despicable. The man sitting there with the beard, Al-Jilani, oversaw forces that were beheading people, actually beheading people, and killing them because of their religious beliefs, killing Christians, killing Shia Muslims, killing Alawites. And here's David Petraeus. He's opening up a big pan of, big container of butter and rubbing it all over al-Shara's ass. I mean, it was despicable, disgusting. But hey, what do we expect from the guy at West Point who was known as, he was the kind of sycophant who would marry the commandant's daughter just to get ahead, which is in fact what he actually did.
Yeah.
David Petraeus is a disgrace.
This is a man, Nima, whom after I sent my spy to Baghdad in 2003, I think it was, to tell me if what we were getting at the State Department with regard to all manner of statistics like police trained, military trained, so forth, was accurate, because Petraeus was in charge of what we call Minsticky at that time, and he was sending the data in and talking to the president from time to time. And what Matt told me essentially was that of the battalions that he was saying were well-trained and could provide internal security as well as eventually external security, the AWOL rate was somewhere between 20 and 30% every morning. Of those that were being trained for the Interior Ministry, he was telling me that the thugs that had always been there were now in the Interior Ministry, and we could look forward to some really wonderful developments coming forth from that group, and on and on and on. All to say that this man, I think he was a 2-star at the time, was essentially telling lies from Baghdad to make his performance there look better. And I got to say that as he rose up in the ranks, his performance only on one occasion didn't improve that much. And that one occasion was what probably got him Paula Broadwell. At least that's, I've got people out there who are talking to me about how this might have been a honey trap operation sponsored and run by Mossad. Paula Broadwell was the person who really brought David Petraeus down, as it were. And that occasion was when he went before the Senate Armed Services Committee and in testimony actually said words to the effect that the U.S. policy with respect to Israel endangered his troops in the Middle East. He said that, not those exact words, but words that to that effect. Afterwards, he quickly backed up a little bit and so forth, but that was the man who, at that point, regained a little bit of my respect for him because he told the truth. But he backed up pretty quickly, and I think that's why, if this Paula Broadwell honey trap Mossad-run operation to get him embarrassed and actually removed from CIA director is true, that's what that led to, because Israel doesn't let those kinds of things go, especially coming from someone with the prominence that he had at that time. I think it was a 4-star when he did that.
Mm-hmm.
Larry, China, Russia, Iran, and Pakistan reject the U.S. return to Afghanistan, and because they're looking at what's going on with General Petraeus, how he's talking with al-Jolani. The meeting between Zelensky and al-Jolani is somehow alarming for what's going on in the region. And how do you? It seems that everybody knows what's going on and is somehow concerned about what's going on with the two.
Well, look, I think China and Russia missed a grand opportunity. They should have told Trump, "Hey, man, we think that's a great idea. You go on back there, get back in there into Bagram," and then just sit in their lawn chairs with bags of popcorn, just watching. So this is going to be entertaining. Yeah, the United States has a history, going back to the Afghan War in the 1980s, where we consorted with, trained, and encouraged several of these jihadist groups, and then forged ties with them back then that we later used to our benefit or attempt to benefit, like in sparking the Chechen War in Russia. And then the most recent example is consorting with the likes of al-Jolani, now al-Shara, in order to get rid of Bashar al-Assad. And remember, here, Bashar al-Assad, we said he was such a bad guy because even though he was, I think, an Alawite, he protected the Shia and he protected the Christians. He was against the Sunni Islamic extremism. Well, last I checked, that's what we were supposedly against, except those are the ones that we continue to arm and equip and train. So, the rest of the world, I think has a far better grasp upon what we are than we do ourselves. They understand all right off the bat our hypocrisy and that we're not to be trusted.
Nima, let me add to that a little bit. That I just found out from Gary Vogler, who was our man in Iraq for 78 months, oil man in Iraq, that his view, and Dennis Fritz has this, the author of Deadly Betrayal, view now as well. The way the insurgency in Iraq really got started was that Wolfowitz had directed the military to begin shipping Iraqi oil to Israel. Wolfowitz was the Deputy Secretary of Defense. Well, when the Sunnis and al-Qaeda in Iraq found that out, the al-Qaeda elements knew they could count on the Sunni elements to join them in attacking the pipelines. And so Gary had to go into the oil minister and say, why the hell are Iraqis, there were lines at the filling stations. You couldn't get gas. You couldn't even fill your car up. Why the hell are your people attacking your pipelines? Which Gary was in charge of, trying to help the Iraqi oil minister get back into operation and so forth. Well, it's because they're pumping oil to Israel. And they continued to pump oil to Israel. And they continued to attack. And that made the insurgency catch on. Israel's everywhere. Everywhere.
Yep.
And our complicity with them, too.
Larry, NATO Secretary General, said that he claimed that Modi, hit by tariffs, phoned Putin and asked for Ukraine plan, and which was rejected by both Russia and India. They said there was not such a phone call between the two. And here is what NATO Secretary General said to the CNN.
The secondary sanctions, the big one on India.
Yes, but I'm talking about on Russia.
Yeah, but this immediately impacts Russia, because that means that Delhi is now on the phone with Vladimir Putin in Moscow, and Narendra Modi asking me, hey, I support you, but again, could you explain to me this strategy? Because I have now been hit by these 50% tariffs by the United States. So,
based on what India and Russia are saying, he's making things up. He's not.
Are you suggesting that Mark Rutte, the Secretary General of NATO, is a liar? Come on, Nima. How could you say such a thing?
He studied at the feet of Jens Stoltenberg. I mean,
Yeah. What we're seeing is more and more desperation on the part of these Europeans and NATO. I mean, Trump this week, there was a lot of alarm people were sort of, using those three letters, WTF, when Trump put out that Truth Social claiming, oh, Russia's losing, Ukraine's winning, Russia's a paper tiger, and the economy's crumbling. And again, that was my very initial reaction. And then I started looking at what it actually said. And yeah, Ukraine can have all the weapons that NATO can give them, and as long as NATO buys them from us. And so Trump wasn't saying, "Oh yeah, we're gonna back Ukraine to the hilt." No, we'll sell all of our weapons to NATO. Now that presupposes that we actually have weapons we can manufacture.
Yeah,
that's a whole nother question. And then you realized Trump simply was taking these specious claims of people like General Kellogg, General Keane, Jack Keane, General David Petraeus, who were all saying, hey, Ukraine's winning, Russia's losing, Russia's paper tiger. And so Trump repeats that because he's basically saying, why do I have to give anything? I mean, Ukraine is winning. By God, they don't need another thing from us. They're on a roll. In fact, they may go all the way to Moscow. And so at one point, Kellogg and these guys got to come out and say, oh, well, no, Mr. President, we were wrong. Are they going to actually come and finally have to admit that they were making this crap up all along? So Trump just used that as a convenient way to say, hey, since they're winning, man, you don't need me. You guys in Europe, have a good day. Take care of it. Europeans are going, what?
And the one who's really going to have his face in the cream is Lindsey Graham.
Yeah.
But what's so strange? He was asking Erdogan to just not buy Russian oil. How strange is that?
Yeah. No, I mean, he keeps forgetting these countries are going to act in their self-interest. And cutting yourself. The only country that's actually agreed to commit suicide, economic suicide, was Germany when they went along with the destruction of Nord Stream. So far, India and Turkey, faced with sort of the same suicidal notion of stop getting any kind of oil or gas from Russia, have said, "No, are you kidding? We're gonna keep doing that." So, Erdogan is, he's notorious anyway he'll play. He's the only person that can take a two-sided coin and find three sides to it. Okay. So he's, disingenuous at best. So it shouldn't surprise anybody that they're rejecting the U.S. attempts to pressure him.
Carl, do you feel, when it comes to the case of Ukraine, do you feel that as time goes by, the escalation would somehow diminish and reduce, or we're heading toward huge escalations in that front?
That's a good question, Nima. I can't answer that question since I'm not in Trump's head, and I'm not in Hegseth's head or Rubio's head or Putin's head. But it looks to me as though Putin, as I've said before, has made a decision, and that decision is based on several decision criteria. Number one of which is the empire is untrustworthy, the empire is deceitful, the empire will say one thing and do something else. Europe is sort of vassal state to the empire and doesn't know where to go, and, for example, couldn't defend 5-6% of its own territory if it had to. And that he's going to have to go to war with them eventually. And though he doesn't want that, he's convinced that he may have to do that simply because of what he's looking at on the other side of the wall, if you will. So I don't know what that means. I do think we're going to have a regional war either there or down in the southern part in Southwest Asia, and that's got a real distinct possibility of expanding into a much larger war, which expands into possibly even nuclear weapons use. And I think that's at least a 50-50 chance. And that's closer, I think, than we've been in a long time to that kind of a global conflict. Now, I will say, too, that I think most of the responsibility for that is ours. But I think we want it. I think ultimately we want it. And we want it to devolve to the point, and I do mean devolve instead of evolve, that we're fighting China. And we're going to lose that one big time.
Yeah, I was talking yesterday with Stanislav Krapivnik. Stas was, he was born in Russia, but grew up in the United States.
Marine,
U.S. Army, I think.
Oh, soldier. Yeah, you're probably right.
I think it was in the U.S. Army. But then he went back to Russia and served in their military for a bit. But he was telling me yesterday that Putin's coming under a lot of pressure now to get really tough with Ukraine and NATO. They think, he said, really the popular opinion is that Putin's been too soft, that he's been too restrained, that the Russians are basically pissed off and want to hit back. So that's where this thing's headed. That any further provocations inside Russia could very well compel Putin to have to respond in a way that's going to have, he's going to enjoy the broad support of the Russian people. The Russian people aren't saying, "Oh, stop the war." It's just the opposite. They're saying, go kick the hell out of them.
Nima, I've been focused on the southern wing of this arc of crisis because I think Iran is imminent in terms of war. But I found out in the last week that we're doing some really strange things up around Murmansk and in the GIUK Gap and all around the Barents Sea. And this is not necessarily connected with the Arctic, which I said was the northern portion of this arc of crisis. But it is connected with gaining some intelligence on and some leverage on what Russia considers some very critical territory, almost like Kamchatka at the other end. And I don't know why we're doing it other than to build up the ability to, strike from the northern flank, as it were. This is crazy, but it's what we're doing.
Larry, what's the whole thing with the drones in Denmark? And who's doing this, in your opinion? It's so strange.
Well, it's just like what was done here in the United States. Was it last October, September, where they had all those drones over New Jersey and New York?
Yeah.
And we never got an explanation there. So I don't know. Donald Trump claimed that, as soon as I get in office, I'm going to explain it, but we never got an explanation of it. So it's clear, I think you can't rule out that it's an attempt to, create an incident that will provide a rationale or justification for going to war with Russia. Because, Russia's going to get blamed for it, even though, it's too far away for Russia to have, sent those drones over there. But, we had the same phenomenon here in this country.
Colonel, it seems that Donald Trump's visit to the United Kingdom, in that visit to King Charles, the only thing that, in my opinion, is so bold, he was asking for the continuation of the conflict in Ukraine. He was asking for more support coming from the United States. Who's convincing King Charles to do that? And is that his sort of policy? Is that someone in the Starmer government to do that? Who's running the show in the United Kingdom? Because I think the heart of what's going on in Ukraine in terms of the support they're getting from the Europe is in London, is in the United Kingdom.
Well, we forget in the United States that there are two houses in London. There's the Parliament that we're most familiar with, that we watch in Prime Minister Question Time and so forth, and that stuns us with their ability to debate and so forth. And then there's the House of Lords. The House of Lords is the house of government in Great Britain that is most responsible for living off the United States and continuing their empire and their imperial mindset in their vision. they're the ones who are the financiers, if you will, of what's happening. The king listens to them. The king is influenced by them. And this king in particular, I think, is in that vogue. And so you have Great Britain living as if it were an imperial entity through the United States' genuine imperial enterprise. That's where the influence on the king comes from, in my view. And, you know, I've studied Great Britain for a long time. That's where it comes from, in my view.
Larry, the other part of the operation that they're capable of, in my opinion, that is much more important than the military part of their power is the intelligence that they're gathering. I'm talking about the United Kingdom, how capable, and they're so much capable of gathering information from different sides, from different parties.
And they're plugged into the CIA and the Mossad too, in a huge way. I mean, the real triumvirate now, and Larry knows more about this than I do, but I think it's Mossad, CIA, and MI6.
Larry, how do you feel? What do you think about that?
Well, the Brits have been they've been in the spying business a lot longer than the United States. In fact, the creation of a lot of our special units, whether we're talking the Central Intelligence Agency, again, modeled in some respects after MI6. Delta Force, modeled after the Special Air Service, SAS. The SEALs, after the Special Boat Squad, SBS. So, you know, remember it was in World War II, the Brits had this thing, Special Operations Executive, the SOE, which, again, our OSS was, again, a copycat. So there's always been this relationship that the NSA has people stationed at GCHQ, General Communications Headquarters in England, and they literally sit side by side. So there's the passage of all of that is signals intelligence, which actually I'd argue is probably far more important than the human intelligence side. So as the United States is going to start backing out of this Ukraine thing, the Brits they'll take it over. You know, part of it, you got to wonder if part of their the British desire to go after Russia is this lingering blame heaped on the communists for killing King Charles' third cousin, you know, the Tsar.
And the loss in the Great White Revolution.
yeah. So I mean, it's irrational, but it's real.
I think what's going on in the mind of Brits is that if they can provoke Russia into an attack on their soil, that could bring the United States into the conflict in Europe.
Well, yeah, but think about that. Let's get down. What does that actually mean? Bring the United States into conflict. So are we going to start flying combat aircraft in there? Good luck with that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they won't stay up in the air for too long. Are we going to launch bomb strikes, you know, where we ourselves, not using a surrogate like Ukraine or a cutout, but that we ourselves start attacking Russia's mainland? At that point, Lavrov and I saw the Russian ambassador to France yesterday. They were both asked what happens if NATO shoots down a Russian aircraft. And both of them said it will be war. Well, that means Russia will attack the continental United States if we get into it. Are we going to put troops there? We got a few troops already based in Europe, but not enough to make any kind of difference other than to, you know, fill up a bunch of body bags and you know, help the funeral industry in the United States make some money. So it would take us months to actually mobilize forces and move them forward. So that's this. They haven't even thought through. Yeah, we want to bring the United States in on this to do what? To do what? Because we're We've given them weapons. We've given them money. We've given them technical advice. We've given them intelligence. It's almost like, the old Beatles song, I give you all I got to give.
Nima, we would lose our entire military in the first time zone of Russia. This won't go down like Ukraine. This will be a nuclear war. It's the only way the empire can respond decisively against a country like Russia or China. We will go to nuclear war, and they will join us. That's what we're looking at.
Thank you so much, Carl and Larry, for being with us today.
And don't forget to thank the Colonel for showing up with such a stylish shirt.
Ooh.
Beautiful.
I'm getting all kinds of cards and letters.
That's great. we started a thing.
Welcome to the club.
All right. Well, we'll see you on Monday.
See you on Monday.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.